Now it's a pleasure to introduce Simon. Dr. Simon Mouatt, for those who don't know him, he's going to give two things. One, the prayer from our old friend, live and kicking at 95, Anglican Canon Peter Challen from the Christian Council of Monash Justices. In the morning, I got totally put off by the Zoom, meeting. A wrong one was sent out by Baba Yusuf's staff. I found out that's what happened. And then the African canon, he stopped his he stopped his service. I didn't realise he had stopped his service just to join, so I was totally off guard. So Simon's going to rectify that. One with the Christian prayer. More importantly, he's going to speak on the global political economy and global reset, and from the Christian Council of Monash Justice. And then we have got Professor Imtiaz Khan from the USA, representing the world's Kashmir diaspora, and he's going to talk about connecting a strand that we haven't really taken seriously. I have, but Hindutva Zionism Alliance, Kashmir, Indian Muslims in Pakistan, that is waiting to explode. Right, over to you, Simon, on your contribution. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Maureen. Would you like prayer at the beginning or at the end? I had thought at the end, but
you're in control for the next 30 minutes, and it's a relaxed discussion, so don't feel rushed. Right, carry on.
And what's the time? How long would you like me to speak for?
No. As we agreed, you got 30 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Our normal format.
Might be more.
If you want to keep it shorter, it's up to you. But okay, I think we need to listen to people. You're a scholar, you've written books, etc., etc. We need to listen to people who have worked. Yeah. By the way, I've got an intervention. Sorry, this is media for you. Thomas says prayer first, and it's up to you, obviously.
Yeah. Okay. I do not mind. I saw Peter Challen last week. I spent an afternoon with him, and I do see him quite regularly. I actually consider him to be a very close friend.
And, of course.
Yeah, he's ex-clergy. He was, for those of you that don't know him, he was canon of Southwark Cathedral, but he was an industrial chaplain for many years. So he worked with working people and really got to understand the nitty-gritty lives that they had and all of their aspirations and feelings about the political economy around them and various other areas like that. And I think that has driven him through the years. He attended Cambridge and had some good input around his theology, but as a person he became increasingly, and still would say today, distressed by the shall we say constraints of doctrinal rigidity that we find in denominationalism. He's someone who very much explores the mystical, very much a believer of interfaith dialogue, and sees humanity as one with each other, and in a very real, tangible way, not just in a sort of paying lip service to interfaithness. He actually has a sort of genuine, natural valuing, I think, of the views of others, and holds to the kind of general idea that differences of opinion, rather than being polarized things to other, he instead sees them as part of the whole, which is a bit of a Hegelian idea. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the philosophy of Hegel, but Peter very much is that sort of person. So what he did say when asked about how he would introduce the prayers, his kind of three key things that trouble him center around usury, which I think for him is much more than just interest on debt. It's just general excessive exploitation in all of its many forms, And so he opposes that. The second issue that is really important for him is the tragedy of the commons, the loss of not just losing commonly owned things and property rights, but in the same sense that individuals don't feel that they are of any value to the decision makers of the planet. And so he's very much a someone who values the voice within the higher self of everybody, regardless of what or who they are. So very much a believer in, if you like, the fact that good people exist in all walks of life, and that would extend to people. Might be a bit controversial here, but he very much is a universalist in this regard. He would view that there is somebody somewhere in the Netanyahu regime that has the right motives and is perhaps constrained or restricted by institutional hierarchy and various other constraints on them. And what I think his general overall philosophy is that he likes the idea of listening, and bringing out the genius within, the higher self within, the Atman within, the divine spark within, if you like, is very much what he's about. So to pray on his behalf, I hope that I can represent what he would say accurately. If not, please accept my apologies. But my prayer would be to all of us here, that the divine is with us, that God is with us, and seeks us to really know that we are one, and value that we will genuinely value each other, regardless of whatever labels or, doctrinal things that we might appear to have. That he just wants us to be in a sort of agnostic way, taking everybody at face value, and with trust, with a real genuine desire to trust, and therefore find something very constructive from the conference today. So my prayer, Father God, I pray that is what you facilitate amongst us today, and thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Simon. So we did get a Christian, Muslim, Jewish, New Abrahamic Accords, although the South African top imam, he sent another message. I need to check what happened on Baba Yunus's link that his staff sent out. But anyway, carry on. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, well, yeah, you asked me to speak on the reset agenda, and specifically the global political economy and how it all fits in. So, firstly, the reset agenda, something that has been around for a while. Some would say centuries, of course, but in more recent times, we have the United Nations Rio Conference of 1992 on the environment. But certain principles came out of that. Agenda 21, we have Agenda 30, and we have the current so-called reset agenda. And effectively, it is an attempt by World Economic Forum and United Nations on behalf of humanity. And this, of course, is the stated aims of what they're doing. They recognize there are some serious existential crises facing us all, and it's an attempt to provide a solution to that. And this includes poverty, it includes inequality, it includes climate change, it includes the need for sustainable development, it includes health, and it includes education, and human rights as well. And so this is the kind of stated agenda. However, the problem is there is a deep amount of suspicion from all manner of people around the globe concerning that, partly because of the people promoting, the people who are seeing themselves at the helm of that agenda, and rather than seeking to be inclusive of humanity as a whole, it appears that it's a small elite group wishing to impose, as it were, their solutions on humanity. And I think that's, in short, what the problem is. Now, regardless of who they are as a group or as an elite group of people doing that, and I'll leave that for our own imagination given our conversations today, but the general view is that rather than intending good things for humanity, that they've actually got pernicious aims and objectives, and therefore are using these things that we all feel that need addressing on the planet, are hijacking that in a way and using that as a vehicle to bring in their own agenda. Now, of course, this is not what they say they are doing, and so all of us have a certain knowledge or not knowledge or faith, if you like, of what we think they're doing, what we think they're not doing. And really, I think anything that works closer towards understanding what's actually going on here is going to be of benefit to all, and also of benefit to the people in the World Economic Forum and in the UN themselves, some of whom might not be fully aware of what the agendas of some of their colleagues are. So I want to place this whole reset agenda, if I may, which I am hoping will fit with what other speakers have said today. I'd like to sort of speak about this within the historical growth of capitalism as a free market system over the last 300 years. Now, particularly as it's manifested in Britain and Empire, and how it's manifested in the Anglosphere in United States today, that obviously some see as the Great Satan and the Little Satan, and there certainly appears to be elements within both Britain and America that have been big Satans and little Satans. At the same time, there's also, in my experience as a British person growing up here, most people on the ground have got nothing to do with the activities of elites within Britain. But at the same time, any experience we might have had of people from higher office, shall we say, or who might possibly be part of this elite, there are many people that certainly appear to be very genuine and not disingenuous. So what I'm trying to say is that I'm sure there are elements within all of our societies that we're not pleased with or proud of, yet there are other elements that we would point to as being paradigms of better behavior. Okay, so capitalism, 300 years. Well, longer really than 300. A lot of historians will point to maybe 400 or 500 years in terms of the earlier stage of mercantilism, which really was a breakaway from, if you like, more feudal economic systems. And it started to see the growth of private firms and private companies, and therefore increasing wealth held held by new entrepreneurs and investors, as opposed to the more traditional aristocratic, if you like, and moneyed class that coexisted with the ancient regime, as they call in France, that of aristocracy and landed gentry and the various hierarchies that existed within that culture. So capitalism's born then, if you like, out of this idea of an emerging mercantile class. Other people have less favorable phrases for them, but essentially it is the free markets, competition between firms, the pursuit of profit. And I think it's important to understand, in order to understand Anglo-Saxon, Anglosphere culture, that it kind of is born, the modern Britain in a way is just really still, I would argue today, reflects that initial period of that started back in the Age of Enlightenment, which the French call the Age of Light, or the cycle, or the Century of Light, I think they call it. So there is this idea that the superstitions, and that includes religions, of course, the superstitions and faiths are going to be pushed aside, and reason, science, rationality, logic, constitutional practices of law, political systems tempered in their by the separation of powers, by separating the executive from the legislative, from the judiciary. In other words, systems that promote the idea of what you might call a more secular diversity, but one in which liberal ideas, and these are all obviously massively promoted by people like Thomas Paine, the rights of man, very much promoted in the ideas of the French Revolution, the American Revolution, but also in Britain. And this is the bit that I think is key, because obviously Britain became, as we know, into a very powerful nation state during the 19th century. Well, that was all predicated on, in my opinion, on what happened after the Civil War. So after the English Civil War, you had the formation of the Bank of England, of course, and I think I'll give reference to the significance of that later. But effectively, you've got the creation of a constitutional monarchy. William of Orange was brought in as a sort of conspiratorial way, really. He was brought in to form the new monarchy, which would be neutered in its power, and the powers of capital, the powers of the businesses, and the power of the businesses and the banks would therefore become the investors would, and the banks and the corporates would become the class of people that would be more powerful in British society, and the aristocracy of old was seen as something that would be slightly restricted in its power. And I think in the mentality of British people today is that was seen, would be seen as a helpful thing, because it was taking autocracy or centralization of power away from the aristocracy, reducing the power of the aristocracy and increasing the power of the people. But what they meant by the people, of course, was effectively the powerful groups within the people, i.e. the banks and the businesses. And to my thinking, banks and businesses have dominated British society ever since. So something that I think people like Marx and others were very acutely aware of. Now, if that kind of story, if you like, about the growth of capitalism from the end of the 1600s through into the 1700s and then the revolutions, if that time from then to now can be described as the rule of corporate and banking elites, we could obviously argue the toss around how influential the royal family are on things today, but the point I would like to make is that I think the British elites that have evolved over the last 300 years are effectively moneyed elites. They are effectively a plutocracy in that sense, because without money and without resources, there is no power. So whether we're talking about the Israeli state, whether we're talking about Christian Zionists and their influence on the Israeli state, whether we're talking about Britain's ability during the colonial era and moving into the First World War with Balfour, what was Britain's, how did they have that capability? They had it from money and the ability to purchase resources, to finance strong militaries, to finance interventionist policies in other countries as a consequence of the dominance of money and resources, which came from huge quantities of economic growth that came from the Industrial Revolution, of course, and later from colonialism and exploitation of resources of other countries and so forth. But it was that monetary and corporate strength that led to a strong British state, which enabled them to, once the Zionist lobby had become influential over the British state in the 19th century, and they managed to get the British state behind them. From that point on, the Zionists, of course, had managed to take control of a state that had substantial resources at its disposal. And I think that's a really important point that I would like to make, and I don't think it's any different today. If we look at 2025, we know that the Christian Zionist movement in America has colossal financial resources at their disposal. We also know that the influence of Zionism in the American state is incredibly influential. And I think I can state that fairly confidently. The reason I would argue that is because even with the Trump supporters, and many of those people, ironically, many of the people that support Trump are hoping that this kind of elite, this cabal, whatever we want to call it, that has been responsible for so much perhaps damage around the world. They would quite like to see lots of that corruption that they see as part of the deep state in America. They would like to see that gone. Yet, ironically, simultaneously with opposing the corrupt powers of a deep state, they also are silent on the issue of Zionism, because it is well understood in American psyche how powerful the Christian Zionist lobby is. And so therefore there appears to be support from Trump for the Zionist movement, and it just seems to be in a bit of a confused, to my mind, a bit of a confused mess at the moment, because they've got this support for Zionism, yet they've got all of the Trump support that seems to be behind Trump and hoping that he will temper some of the exploitation that exists within the banks and also the free market system. So it just seems to me a bit of an irony or a bit of a paradox going on in American life today. So to bring this back to some points, I'm not sure how long I've got, Moeen, how long I've been talking.
No, carry on. It's relaxed. We need to understand the beast. You got another at least 15 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I agree, Moeen, it is a beast. Yeah, I also would contend there are good people working in that beast. They might not know it, they might be deceived. And I think that's partly, why I was quite attracted to Thomas de Fern's idea of the devil being ignorance. I think there's a lot of support for that view actually in different mystical circles. For example, in and around the idea of the fall of mankind and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil being sometimes the Hebrew mystics relate the tree of the knowledge of good and evil to the human ego. And when the human ego is combined with being ignorant and deceived, you get all sorts of practices on the earth. And I think in some ways we could see that what we see as the devil can sometimes just be a group of doctrinally obsessed, ego-based thinking that have got a different view to our own understanding of what we consider to be just and true. And I think that's why I think what Thomas suggested earlier would be a fantastic thing to explore further from an interfaith perspective, so that we can try to understand the role that ego and ignorance has had in our own thinking, so that we can find a greater understanding of our own faith and the faith of those that we are working with. Yeah. I hope that made sense.
No, I agree with you. In case you want more questions, all I'd suggest is I did
Idea.
request for decoding the World Economic Forum, because what is not said or talked about is where the action's happening. It's like the reality also. If I say to you, to understand the reality or indeed end times, there's an invisible world. I mentioned, man made of clay, angels of light, and jinn of smokeless fire. You're talking about a whole different ball game. Same with money. What do you think? These top people. They meet every year, Davos. What is their agenda, or what is their real agenda? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess with any agenda, if you get invited in, and you do get invited in, you don't choose to go. You get invited into these type of elite organizations, which um, I think Thomas mentioned Varis Varoufakis earlier. I mean, he has a famous saying about insiders and outsiders, that if you're outside of decision-making forums, you can be autonomous and have your own views and propagate your views. But if you get invited into decision-making forums, you pretty much are expected to keep quiet, and you might be lucky to influence, but and if you do, you've been influential. But the general protocol of those inner forums are that once decisions have been made, you are expected to defend them, even if they're not your own views. And that's, I think,
Yeah.
I think that's a very insightful comment of Varis Varoufakis. And I would like to suggest that all of those banking elites, all of those corporate elites, all of those Zionist elites, all of those Davos elites, etc., are also under the same powerful protocol, that they are expected as invitees to the forums to honor whatever decisions were made. And so if you've got a dominance within those forums of, let's say, a cult with crazy egotistical ideas about what they want to impose on society, if that is going on, then my big question for it is, where is the input of the rest of the planet, of the rest of 7 billion people who actually have got something to say? And this, I know in this point I'm mirroring what Peter, I know, believes very strongly, is that he dislikes institutional hierarchies that leave huge quantities of voices unheard. And I know it's impossible to hear 7 billion people, but what I hope that the solution might be, and I'm also with Thomas in the sense that, and I'm probably deceived, I admit that I might be deceived, but I like the idea of a happy eschatology, that we might somehow just be able to avert, as one of the reasons why I'm here, is I genuinely hope that by talking with us all talking, that we might possibly be able to avert World War III and conflict between Abrahamic faiths, conflict, blah blah blah. I've got this kind of, I might be, it might be some form of trying to kid myself of something that isn't true. I admit that, but I prefer to hold to the hope that we might be able to avert disaster, and that good people might end up being able to be influential over anybody that has got a harm in humanity's harm in mind.
Oh, okay, that's fine. That's fine. Because some people have been here for a while compared to others. We'll go immediately to the last speaker, then have the final session. Yeah, Q&A and
Sure.
recommendation.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah, I'm
okay?
happy to stop there, Moeen.